Hi, everyone. It's the UnMusking Show again. I call it a comedy show to speak my mind freely without fear of being sent into the depths of Russia and freeze my butt off like Snowden. I could have splurged and brought in a live band, an audience, and ever-smiling Hollywood stars, but I'm used to living within my means. Otherwise, I wouldn't live in this tiny house costing $50,000. It's very convenient, by the way. You can take a fresh toilet paper roll from the living room without getting up from the toilet.
Right, Ewan is very frugal. I came over once. He doesn't even have a single piece of gym equipment. Where does he hang his clothes?
But turns out, no matter how carefully I spend my money, over the last month, my debt increased by $1,500. Same goes for every other American citizen. Yep, this brings us to today's topic. U.S. national debt is ballooning faster than an American teenager living next to a McDonald's. Just this year, it grew by $3 billion to a whopping $34 trillion. This means that each U.S. citizen owes $101,369. In other words, the average American needs to work almost 2 years with zero spending to eliminate this debt. That's 42 and a half years if they pay back only $200 a month. Imagine having a middle-aged son whom you still give allowance for burgers and movie tickets.
How do you do, fellow kids?
In both cases, everyone knows something doesn't add up, but they keep pretending it's all good. As a result, this careless approach to spending, our national debt grows 2 times faster than our economy. In medical terms, U.S. national debt would be considered a tumor. And the worst part is, I can't tell how these loans are being spent. I look around and don't see people clad in gold driving around Lambos. Real people, I mean, not those social media influencers. So whose fault is that? Let's recall our previous episode. And since our quality of life didn't increase, that means we need to take on extra debt just to keep things going as they are. Honestly, does this person sound reasonable?
So I bought a new car, financed it.
Do you really need a new car?
No, mate, but applying for a loan was so easy. Just couldn't help myself.
But how do you plan to pay for it?
You deaf, mate? I will get the number loan to repeat it first one.
Would you be okay if your daughter wanted to marry someone like that? But our government basically makes the same financial decisions. Mr. President, why does our government act like a teenager with poor impulse control?
I believe you can't compare the U.S. government to an erratic teenager. It's an insult to the teenager.
So, how's China's national debt? I keep comparing United States and China not because I'm a fan of socialism and cheap smartphones. The first reason is that it's the only big enough rival of the United States in the last 30 years. Reason number 2, I know a thing or two about China. After all, I have a factory there. And number 3, I need to keep saying good things about China if I want to sell 1 million Teslas a year in that market. Oh, and there's a 4th reason. Lately, I've been talking about the United States and the Western world so much that given the ongoing war on free speech, I think it would be a good idea to have a safe haven just in case. Just kidding. Well, for the time being. Anyway, all I'm doing is using publicly available data. So if someone doesn't like my conclusions, they can, resign and free up the presidential office for someone who knows a thing or two about economy. So here's the graph for China's national debt over the last several years. Sure, it's growing even faster than in the United States and is also expected to surpass its GDP soon. But yes, there's a but. National debt is not bad in itself. As long as the government invests the money in the national economy, over the last 20 years, China's GDP increased 9.5-fold. America's GDP increased only 2.5 times. China greatly boosted the population's income, secured its place as the world's strongest economy, held amazing Olympics, and expanded its political influence all over the globe. Meanwhile, in the US, the number of heterosexuals shrink by 20%, and its army fought in 9 international conflicts. Sounds like money well spent. There's another key difference between China and the United States, though. For too long, people believed it was an advantage of the American economy, but it has proven itself to be a trap of sorts.
It's a trap!
No, I'm not talking about perpetually using half-naked women in all sorts of advertisements. I'm talking about the international currency of choice, which the US dollar is and the yuan isn't. The following may be a bit boring, but important for understanding the issue. What is the US national debt comprised of? No, not hopes of countries such as Iran, North Korea, and Russia. that America will soon go bankrupt. It consists of U.S. bonds traded by investors on the stock exchange. When there isn't enough investors to buy them all up, the bonds are bought out by the Federal Reserve to protect the market from collapsing. And it does so by printing dollars. Can't really blame them. Can you really help yourself from stealing away a few bites when you're preparing a holiday feast? The more dollars are in the economy, the higher the inflation. The higher the inflation, the more they need to increase the yield of the bonds, their financial appeal. And that means the government requires more money to pay back the debt. And the more money it needs, the more bonds the government issues, which is then followed by printing more money, and the vicious cycle continues. That sounds like a man taking revenge on a rake by jumping on it. China's not that wasteful. If the country does print a lot of yuan, they won't end up all across the globe, unlike dollars. After all, the yuan is not the international currency of choice. Instead, the yuan will remain in China, which will immediately cause huge inflation. That's why China doesn't try to pour money down the drain as the go-to solution of all financial problems. Tell me, Mr. Xi, does China live within its means?
Can't really afford luxury when you have 1.5 billion hungry mouths to feed.
There is a term, oil curse. It's when a country has a sought-after raw material that keeps increasing in price. Instead of developing its economy, it just settles on selling this material. When the price or demand happen to actually fall, this usually causes an economic collapse, riots, revolution even. Basically everything the US tries to instigate in various nations, but really doesn't want to see at home. As an entrepreneur, billionaire, father of 10 children, and most importantly, creator of the car that looks like an iron, I can guarantee this. The status of the US dollar as a global currency is nothing but its own oil curse. Mr. President, you know this cannot go on forever, don't you?
What? I'm 81. I don't care.
I'm not. I'm 54, and I do see that year by year fewer and fewer countries use the dollar as a reserve currency. I see that, although slowly, the share of BRICS currencies is growing, especially when it comes to trade between member states. I see more and more countries adopt direct exchanges using their own national currencies. There's also cryptocurrency, of course, and we may even see metaverse currencies down the line. The bottom line is the US Federal Reserve is starting to resemble an aging prostitute. Sure, it can still do some old tricks, but no one really wants to see that anymore. No doubt the road to a multi-currency world will be neither easy nor quick. The dollar empire will not crumble overnight, and experts on the payroll keep saying that it's all par for the course. A life of debt is the powerhouse of a modern consumption economy. Yeah, but here's the thing. Remember the inaugural address given by Herbert Hoover back in 1929? In the large view, we have reached a higher degree of comfort and security than ever existed before in the history of the world. Everyone clapped hopefully and beamed with joy, and then 6 months later, this happened. By the way, the Great Depression was caused by, you guessed it, blunders of the Federal Reserve. 2029 marks 100 years since the Great Depression. But seeing as how things are going with the US national debt, we just may take part in the largest reenactment in human history. Mr. Xi, what would you do about the US national debt if you were the president?
In China, we treat everything with care, even expired groceries. But I wouldn't touch the US national debt with a 10-foot pole.
The world is on the verge of uncertain times. Local conflicts, refugees, economic crises, the threat of a nuclear holocaust. And all we do in the face of these challenges is stare like dinosaurs at the meteor barreling towards Earth. The hardworking and frugal will survive, and yet we keep eating and consuming. We try to manage all the conflicts in the world, hoping to be the wardens of the chaos we created. We keep throwing money and human lives into the furnace, unable to see that we can't keep it up anymore. We are starting to drown in chaos, and yet we keep believing ourselves to be the pinnacle of creation on this earth, believing that the sheer amount of military bases scattered across various countries will safeguard the dominating status of the US dollar. But the world moves towards a multipolar system, and now these countries have a choice whom to ally with, now. We keep spending more than we earn. We cowardly borrow money from our neighbors instead of dealing with problems head on. We are cutting down a future branch of our family tree. So what can we do? First and foremost, avoid these painful metaphors. But for real, the least we can do is to limit the growth of national debt. That means equalizing government spending and revenue. Warren Buffett has a great piece of advice on this topic.
You just pass a law that says that anytime there's a deficit of more than 3% of GDP, all sitting members of Congress are ineligible for re-election.
This year, the U.S. federal budget deficit is almost 24%. If we were to adopt such a policy, it would force all these people to work as DoorDashers, Uber drivers, and other jobs requiring similar skills. This would force the next generation of senators to open up a dictionary and look up words other than borrowing. Some may say that if we only focus on curbing the deficit, we risk undermining education, healthcare, and other social initiatives. But I believe that first we need to pay back our loans and then think about other things. For example, I'd like to have Cillian Murphy's awesome cheekbones, but I'll go for the surgery only once my social network starts turning a profit. That means it might never happen. Mr. Biden, if this was your personal debt and not a national one, what would you do?
I would pretend I'm going senile, falling from stairs, talking to invisible people.
Right. Anyway, the first way to stave off the debt crisis is effective, but no one will ever adopt such a law. The words responsibility and senator simply cannot be in the same sentence, unless there's another word there, shift. But let's not lose heart. This is a comedy show, and we can do whatever we want. Let's imagine the United States acting the same way a regular guy would act if he were drowning in debt. First thing to do is they go off grid. Don't pick up the phone. Don't go out. Stay out of sight. Avoid people they owe like the plague. Now, I understand what happened to Ashton Kutcher. He just has a huge national debt. We do the same thing, but on a national scale. We're keeping our mouth shut, never comment on world events, avoid UN meetings, sit tight, and pop out to get some groceries only when they unveil the new iPhone, hoping our debtors would forget about us. What else does a debtor do? That's right, take out more loans, and we need to borrow money from countries whose butt we can kick if it comes down to it. Although we already did that. We made the US dollar into the global currency. And now for the most important thing, how do we actually stop borrowing money? Imagine us making a public announcement. We, the American people, agree to our national debt in the current amount. All following bonds issued and debt accrued by our government should be paid back by this government and not by us. That's it. No one loans us any more money. We just sit tight and live happily ever after. And let the public officials deal with extra debt hiding away in the forests from European collector agencies and Chinese triads. It may be a comedy, but I'm not laughing. Take it from me, I watched the Barbie movie, and yet there are no protests. Not million-strong marches calling to live within our means. Why do people care more about transgender people than their own children? Perhaps it's because the government is not highlighting the issue. Well, they're not supposed to. The handbook to running a nation has just one page, and it contains just one sentence. Don't let them panic, but why don't regular people understand it? I mean, it's simple math, middle school stuff. I guess that depends on the school, though. It's kind of a lame segue, sure. But anyway, the next episode will cover modern education, or, in other words, a ticking time bomb. Oh, yeah. I suggested we live within our means several times today. I guess I should lead by example. At the end of the show, we plan to have my good friend Jason Statham singing and dancing, but I can't really afford it, so I made this sacrifice for America.